So I'm going to show you that the 1st of December this year, I will have been in business 50 years. I started at 23 and I'll be 73 at the end of the year. And in those 50 years, I will show you very quickly what I've done. And then what I've learned through all the mistakes you make, all the decisions you make that are good or not so good. And I'll try to frame all this in the question career. How do you improve your career? And what are the chances, opportunities, difficulties in this global economy? Okay? So, let's start with my career. I started with Goodyear for 15 years and fresh out of school, didn't know anything, and they taught me little by little by sending me to different departments. And I spent, in the 13 years, they sent me to 11 different countries. So I have 4 children, they're all born in a different country. I have now 8 grandchildren and they live in different countries. So that's thank you to Mr. Goodyear. But the reason that at 31 they made me the president of Germany because we had a real big problem. You may not recall this, but we had high-speed tires that exploded. And a lot of manufacturers had these bad tires. So nobody in Goodyear wanted to go to Germany because there were no speed limits, they had bad tires, and they had a lot of accidents. So I was elected at a very young age to go to Germany. And after my 15 years were over, I was asking myself, what are you doing in a secondary industry? You know, tires are first bought by the automobile companies. And if you want to sell tires to Mercedes, you have to test 5 years. And after it's approved, then they say, oh, you're the last supplier. Now you want to get in? The lowest price. So I said to myself, I got to get out of this industry. So I was hired by a company called General Biscuits in Paris, who were in the food manufacturing. So I went from the stinky tires to the good-smelling cookies, which was a big change. But then I was in the French economy, but of course they wanted to go to America, so they made me the vice chairman, but also the president of America. So I bought 3 big companies for them in the US. It worked very well. And then Ahold was the 3rd largest supermarket chain in the world, and they wanted somebody who knew the US and who knew France and Europe and Germany. So all of a sudden I was invited. So you can see, no career plan. Huh? I was always asked, would you please come to us? So then I became their president of the USA, and then the president worldwide was kidnapped and killed, and they elected me the president worldwide. So now I'm back in Holland, very visible. You know, if they killed the president, you can imagine, you know, security was very high. So because of that visibility, you know, I said, well, we got to do something, and I took the company public. And then we made such a good progress, not so much because of me, but they had very good stores and I had very good managers. You know, I was elected 3 times as the best financial CEO in the Netherlands. And that, of course, took the eye of the chairman of Philips, and he said, maybe we're in trouble, maybe we should hire Mr. Everaert, and maybe he can come and help us. And sure, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse, so I became the president of Philips USA and the board vice chairman in Holland. And that was fun. And then as I got a little bit older, you know, my wife said, when are we going back to America? You know, we've been living in Europe in so long. And I said, we'll see. And The Belgian brewery, which was called Interbrew, was a family business with about 300 million euros in business. And I'm coming from Philips with 40 billion. So the family said, would you please come and help us? And I said, maybe, why not? But I can tell you, it's a big change, right? So you go from a 40 billion company with 280,000 employees to a small family business. But the small family business had something unbelievable to offer. They had very good beers. They had no debt and a lot of money. So I was able to buy more breweries. And when I left in 2008, we had 195,000 employees, and we were doing $72 billion worth of business in about 180 countries. And then just before I left, we had the opportunity to buy Anheuser-Busch, the largest brewery in America, 54% market share. And we succeeded in doing that. So now, if you look at abimbev.com, you will see today their market cap was $132 billion. So, I mean, I've been very lucky. I didn't have to plan my career. A lot of people ask me, can you please come and help us? So, I've had a magnificent long run. And then if you look there in 1980, when I was with the French, I read someplace in a magazine, I think it was in The Economist, that they had the European Economic Forum in Davos. Now it's the World, then it was the European EEF. And Dr. Schwab said, well, why don't you join us? It was not expensive. I think it was 2,000 Swiss francs or so. Now it's 35,000. And he said, why don't you join us? February, why not? So I went to Davos, and I met all kinds of interesting professors, and I must say I learned a lot on how to structure the strategy for the company. So since then, every year I went to Davos to write or rewrite my strategy. And you have tons of people there to ask questions. How do you do it? Right now, 10 years ago, it became very political. Hillary Clinton would go, Bill Clinton would go. So now it's politics, no longer economy. And you have a hard time getting a hotel room. So they made me a governor of the World Economic Forum, which is a group of about 40-50 people from around the world that help the World Economic Forum to set their strategy and expand. Then in 1994, my very good friend, who is a PhD, and he had this idea. The Berlin Wall came down. He said, we should make a fund and see if we can invest in the new world. So they looked at the Balkans and they looked at the Baltics. And together we found that the Baltics were much better than the Balkans. And in the Baltics, we were in Estonia, Latvia, but our biggest investment was here in Lithuania. And as soon as the investment was made, he called me and he said, it's fine to give us some money to be part of the fund, but I would like you to help us because we have to do something in Lithuania. And that's when the idea came to make a free economic zone. And we went to see Brašauskas, and we went to the Seimas, and we wrote the law for the free economic zone. We went back to the Seimas, defended it, and in 1996 it was approved. And then, of course, 97 came, and 98, bad years. Russia went down. So we had a beautiful zone, but we had no customers. And finally, in around 2000, 99, 2000, we got our first one. And now we're going towards 27, and over 1.3 billion invested. So that was my hobby, and it worked as well as my normal business. So now, in 2008, when the brewery business was finished, I said, now what I'm going to do? I'm not a golfer, you know, so I said, I got to do something with myself. So you know what these old people do? They all become consultants, right? So I became consultants, and my first customer was a bank. And he said, look, I'm not going to pay you as a consultant. I'm going to pay you as, you know, a member of my board. So he didn't want me as a consultant, and he made me a member of the board, and we're now in 2013, and I'm still a member of the board. But I want you to remember that little red dot there. I'm going to talk about that at the end. It's rather important. So, I think you've all seen the theory of the 3 circles, where you have an interdependence between 3 major functions. And this is a technique that was invented in the University of Fontainebleau in about 1979 by a Belgian professor. And I was very interested because I am very visual. I like graphics and I like visuals. And I said, my God, a corporation works fine when sales, production, and finance are in balance. If one dominates the other, if production is big, they make everything they want to make, even if you can't sell it. You know, if you sell a lot at a low price, you get killed by the finance department. So it has to be in balance. If you go about marketing, it's market research, it's advertising, and promotion. And again, those have to be in balance, or it's not working. If you go in logistics, it's warehousing, in-time invoicing, the right price, and then shipping. If you go into finance, it's accounting, reporting on the results of the company, and mainly treasury, so you get money at a decent price. So now, this is what I'm going to try and do for this presentation. So, if you look at the family, the work, and the social, I'll give you details in the next slide, but unless they're in some balance, you're going to have an unhappy family, you're going to be unhappy, your job's going to suffer, you're not going to make promotions, and your social life, which is changing today, and I'll talk about the new social life, is also going to be in trouble. So, it's the word interdependence. And what you have to do is make sure that the 3 circles are a relationship where each other is dependent on the other. If you're alone pushing the wagon, it won't work. If you're the odd man out, another team player, it won't work. And then the interdependent relationship, let's not kid each other, is based on emotions, because the family part is emotions. Then the work part is mainly economical, what you have to produce and you have to get a reward. And the whole thing, especially in this global economy, has to be morally correct. The rules of ethics, every company now publishes their ethics, their vision, and the way they operate. So that's the parts that are going to be of influence. So now, if you look at the family portion, you look at, you know, what do you expect from life? How, you know, is your wife expecting you to work 14 hours and make 3 times the salary and become the big boss? You know, then is your family allowing to do it? I have 4 children myself and 4 in-law kids. So, I mean, my wife never had the time to work. So you have to really plan that. And then you say, I told you we lived in 11 countries, so the expatriation is not easy. It's not easy to pack all your household and move to another country. But if you say, it's part of what I know we can do, it becomes very feasible. On your work, the first thing is, you want a job. But you ask yourself the question, do I have the talent to fill that job? And if you don't, you're dreaming. And then once you have a job and you're convinced you're very comfortable with your talents, then you say, now I can plan a career. More of the same or more of different. Career inside a company or career outside of a company. And now we come to the social, and you will probably see where I'm going to go with the new social media. It is, of course, global versus local. You know, you're no longer Lithuania, you're part of the European Union. The part of the European Union is just trying to make a big deal with the USA, and that means the Western world. And the Western world, in my economic vision, is going to be the counterpart of the Asian world. Most economists say 2025 will have two blocks: the Asian bloc, the Western bloc, including Russia, European Union, the USA, South America. And that's about 3 billion people, just like the others are 3, 4. But this is where the social aspect becomes important. And then the global academics, you can say, well, I'm an engineer from Lithuania. Those diplomas may be very different in the rest of the world. I'll talk about India and China in a minute, and you'll see what I mean. And the social tools, we were just talking, if I would give this presentation in Shanghai, and I have, you have 500 Chinese in the class. There is a question and answer session. You do not get one question. They are told, don't talk in public. So it's the culture, social culture I'm talking about. So now, if you talk about your jobs and your careers, you're comfortably located in Lithuania. You love it here. You love the area. You drive to Poland. You go to Nida. You drive to Belarus. Take the plane or the train to Moscow or St. Petersburg. So, hey, this is beautiful. I mean, life is good, right, in Lithuania. Schools are good. Hospitals are good. What is bad about this? So you love your area. And yet, somebody is whispering in your ear, look at the movement in the world. And I'll show you what I mean with the movement in the world. And then you say, well, 500,000 of our young Lithuanians have already left. Why did they leave? They left because I think the government is still sitting in dark corridors with closed doors, running the company like they did 25 years ago. And it's not only your government, it's the same in Poland, it's the same in Hungary, it's the same in the Czech Republic. There is a big discrepancy between the movement of the economy and the young people. And unfortunately, those who have to guide us. You think in my country, Washington would be in trouble this week? And we're supposed to be the model of democracy in the world. They don't talk to each other. It's a yes, no, no, yes story. And if you read the paper, it's almost a joke. Mr. Burmer says, oh, I'm waiting until the president comes with a white flag and admits defeat. And the president says, oh, Burmer is going to lose his job. Let him wait another 2 days. And in the midst of that, 800,000 people have no income because they don't pay. 800,000, one day. So it is a change. We've seen it once before in the US, but I mean, it shouldn't really happen. But the most interesting part is the social aspect there. Our president says, I'm the mightiest man in the world. I got the biggest army in the world. I'm going to bomb Syria. Boom. 4 days later, oh, we have to go to the United Nations and ask, what do you think happened? He's got 64,000 tweets saying, Mr. President, we disagree. Am I kidding about the social power? It is real. It is real. For the first time in the United States of America, you don't call your congressman and say, my opinion is you shouldn't do it. Thank you. One more. Oh, yes, one more. Now it's... Not to your senator, to the White House. And there sits Mr. Obama on his BlackBerry. Oh, too much information, I can't read it. So now he needs a computer. Then he goes, can I have one of those big screen apples because I can't read it anymore? So that's the speed of light. So unless you realize that, don't plan your career. It won't work. So now we have the blue circle. Guess what? I substituted it with China. Is your heart going to move from Lithuania to China? I hope so. But it's a question mark. And if you look at that blue circle, why am I putting it there? You see that big arrow? It's the future. And I'm going to show you some very special numbers on that. But there's no doubt that the world is convinced that that part of the world is the future for the next 15, 20 years. China has already bought every harbor around Africa. America, Europe missed the boat. Even Putin missed the boat. They're investing in the US. They're investing in South America. They own 52% of the US debt. In Mr. Obama's office, there are 5 lamps, and 3 of them are Chinese. And the other 2 he can't afford anymore, so he switched them off. But this is the reality. The West, goes from GDP -6 to +12, +5, and Asia +3 to +12. China, India, Japan. I'm talking about 2-3 years ago. Now they're down to 6.9, 8, 9. You're down to 3.9. One time you were 6. But in any event, that is reality, the future. But also, the Chinese and the Indians and the Koreans are not sleeping. The largest automobile company in the US is now Toyota, made in USA. Chrysler is owned by Fiat. GM is in trouble. All the British automobile companies are now in Asia. Volvo is in China with Geely. The Jaguar is in India with Tata. My father used to drive Jaguars. So, and you are still sitting there with your hat from Lithuania. Where do you fit in? And I'm going to show you something. I'm a professor, so I have to come to a school and show something new that you haven't seen, right? So I'm going to show you something in a while. But with your Lithuanian hat, I know you can certainly be of value to yourself and to Lithuanian companies that are going, or EU companies that are going to China and India, or to those Chinese, Indian, Korean companies that come to Lithuania. You go and train there for a while, and you come back. So that's that thing. Now, of course, if you do this, as I said before, you can read the problems working for an Asian company in Europe. The work and the family has to go to training while you're in Asia. It's not easy, because if you move permanently, you can buy a house, your kids to school. If you go for training for 6 months, you're usually alone, and that's not good. Language issues, cultural issues, and very extensive and maybe excessive, too much travel. If you go to work in Asia, you become an expatriate. That's not easy. Work permits, living permits. Your family suffers from language. My wife is Italian, so she is very good in languages, but when we went to Germany, it was kind of a cultural shock. And then we went to Holland, another cultural shock. Then we went back to Paris, another cultural shock. Then we came back to Belgium. Oh, here they speak French with an accent. I said, no, it's called Walloon. So it is very interesting. It's very enriching for the children, but it's not easy. And then you have the housing, schooling, your own parents, when we were living abroad, and your parents are 5,000 kilometers away, and they're a little bit older, you make a lot of trips to go and see your mother and father. So it's all part of this effort you have to make, but it may pay off. So now I'm going to give you what you expect, of course, is the difference between the virtual economy we all learned in school and the green arrow, which is the World Wide Web influence. And this is probably the biggest change. In those 30 years or 40 years you see there, of course, we have the graphics of the GDP, the energy, the oil price. Does it really matter? You know, I never had a sleepless night because the GDP went down a point. You know, but now, when you go to the World Wide Web, everybody in my family has a computer. Everybody in my family has an iPad, a big one and a small one. Everybody has a smartphone, maybe 2 smartphones. You know, everybody has an email address. You know, my wife texts me from upstairs. You know, just like the kids sitting on a couch, you know, in the living room, they text each other. It's a new world. It's a WWW world. You know, so, but in the process, when it comes to business and career, there are fundamental changes in the companies in the way they use the data exchange. What do you do with that? The social media, 1 billion people on Facebook, 400,000 on Twitter, 400 million on Twitter, you can't ignore them. And as I gave the example from Obama, there are hundreds of examples. But as far as your career is concerned, the human resource people are using Facebook. They're using Twitter. They have ways to get in there. God forbid if you have one page at age 19 where you show up in your bikini, you may not be hired as the boss's secretary. So you have to know that. And then, of course, the future of your career is certainly in the commodities, the stock markets. The banks go through an enormous change. And if you're in finance, you'll be part of that change. The word derivative 6 years ago didn't exist. Today everything is derivative. They misuse the term, but it's still called a derivative. And then the logistics and the travel, should I say more? Ryanair is going to be the biggest airline in Europe. Think about Lufthansa, think about Air France, KLM. They joined together, ALM, Air France, now they're going to buy Alitalia. They're still a third of Ryanair. And Ryanair has one type of airplane, biggest discount at Boeing. He refuses to buy Airbus and he flies all over Europe. So these are facts. If you want to work for Ryanair, you better not be a friend of Airbus because you're not going to be hired. So the green dot there, changes in job selection, that's you. And the employer hiring process I'll come back to a little bit later because they hire people a very different way as they did yesterday. So now I'm going to show you a theory. You may know it, you may not know it, but it's called the economic center of gravity in the world. You know, we talk about GDP. Can you map the world with GDP? Yeah. But does that tell you where it's going to go tomorrow? No. You can talk about the average income per family, and the World Bank, and everybody lists it. I'll show you one of the lists. Is that a way to justify why the business goes to Asia? Not really. They have a high GDP and low salaries. So why is the business going to Asia? And then these people, Dr. Madison, who actually was a Brit, but he was for years at the University of Groningen, together with a Washington company, and later on McKinsey, they invented this theory. Don't get scared, it's not very difficult. So what I'm saying is you cannot judge the economic movement by the incomes. Look at Qatar, should be the biggest economy in the world. They're just pumping gas and selling it, right? But they have the highest salary. Luxembourg, 220,000 people, average income almost 100,000. Why is that? Because they have secrecy laws. Everybody has a bank account, nobody knows, right? They don't pay tax. Then you go down and you see that Lithuania is in 46th place, 21,000, and Russia is there with 17. And Russia has an economy, what, 100 times the size of yours? So it is not the salaries or the family income that is a measure. So what these doctors do, professors, they say, look, let's see if we can find a relationship. So they put the GDP on the XY, the classical curve, and it's the red dot. And then they put the salary on the blue dot on the YZ axle. And then they say, okay, now we need a third leg. So they connected the two dots, and you have the black dot for a given year, 2012. In 2009, you know, the blue dot may have been higher, or the red dot may have gone to the left, and the crossing would be where the dot 2009 is. So for every year, you find the black dot, and you call that the economic center. Okay? The weighted center of the economy. Okay? Economic center of gravity. Now, in order to do that, that black dot, of course, is a percentage. It's 40%, 41, 42, 43. So if you put it on a graph, you'll see in a minute the 2008, 2009, 6, 7, and 12 are different points on a percentage on a graphic. And then here's the trick. They said, we can do the globe. I'll show you the world, but it doesn't mean too much. It's funny and scary. But if you do it between the United States and China, you draw a line between New York and Beijing. And then you take the black point, 56%, boom, and you put it on that line. That's the economic center of gravity between China and the US for that particular year. If you draw a line between Brussels and Beijing or Shanghai, you have the same thing. You measure 60%, poof, that's the dot. Okay? And this is the first time somebody has found a mathematical formula to express the center of gravity of a very complex issue, the economy, because they handle private, personal issues. Today, they look at Facebooks and it's an open book. So it is really metamorphosis. Huh? It's not change. It's really a metamorphosis. So the company, if you're the boss, my first concern would be I have to re-engineer my HR department with all the things I showed in the previous slide. And then there's something new. Because of all the apps and the software, the finance director has purchased a software whereby he can mathematically measure the contributions of the employees. So, what does he say? Before you hire a director or a vice president or even a general manager, you know, come and see me. Because I can tell you, based on his experience, based on his talent, based on his language ability, based on his experience with advertising, with promotions, with coupons, all these good things, I can calculate what this man will generate for us. You think my finance director knew that? You know, what did we call an accountant? Number pushers, right? So today he's a little lion who really says, let's do the right thing for the revenue generation. So if that is the case, we come back to our general statement. So if you are in the market for a job, and I'm not necessarily talking about your first job, I'm talking about promotions. I'm talking about change within the industry. I'm talking about changes outside your industry, outside of Lithuania, Europe, and to Asia. You know, if you go that way, you better be aware of what the hiring process is in the US, for instance, or in Asia. And it's not difficult to find out, but if you go online and you apply for a job online, even with somebody else's name, you will see the questions. And you will immediately see the difference Actually between Los Angeles and New York, and between New York and Brussels, and between Brussels and Beijing. But you can see it on the net. It's very difficult. If you're going to change from the area you're in, you know, I think you should pick a growth area. And a growth area means a growth industry, as well as an area where that industry matures. Think about Silicon Valley, 1937 until about 1999, the dot-coms. I mean, explosive. If you see the value of the stock of those people, you know, Mr. Ballmer from Microsoft is leaving with $11.6 billion. I don't even know how to write that. I don't even know how many zeros there are, you know? So, pick a growth area. And today, it's funny that I should mention it because I had a 3-day presentation in Russia, in Perm, and they had 700 of the top-ranking Russian politicians there, because they, you know, they have this huge investment in innovation. And they asked me to come and be the devil's advocate. I had to listen for 3 days to all their presentations, and the last day I had to tell them, you're right or you're wrong. Well, the third day in the morning, I thought I was going to go on the airplane and go back home, but I did tell them. But this is what I mean, you know, the Russia thinks they're a growth area. They're an innovative. They spend millions on building buildings, you know, and hiring people, but they kill it because of their bureaucracy. The first thing they did was build the building, no customers yet, and then who's the boss, the sub-boss, the mini-boss, you know, and when they were through with the vertical, they went with the horizontal. How many people does he need there? For me, it was a discovery, but it was really interesting. And obviously, I was not too wild. I was critical, but with a positive thinking, right? But that's the growth area. And then, the most difficult thing to do, in my experience, when interviewing people, if the person who interviews is too high in the company, you know, and the person you interview applies for a job at 3 levels down, they're dead. People walked in my office, you want a glass of water? I mean, they are so nervous because I don't think schools teach people how to talk to the Minister of Economy. You know, you learn how to speak in a class and your neighbor and maybe your immediate boss. But if the Minister of Economy comes to your company, or the President comes to your company, you know, only the chief can talk. And everybody has to shut up. That's not the way you learn. When I had a minister from Holland visiting Philips or whatever in France, you know, General Biscuit, I let my people talk. The minister said, sits down, he expects a presentation. Why do I have to talk? All these guys, young people, are dying to show they know. So you delegate. Remember the word delegation? It's not bad for the boss, you know. It's good for the boss. But how many universities, how many, you know, institutes like yours, they all talk about delegation. But it's not delegation of responsibility. You can never do that. It's delegation of authority. So when the young man speaks to the minister, I am still responsible because you cannot delegate your responsibility, but I can delegate my authority. And that's what I say there, sell your talents and learn how to sell your talents. So, if we do this, we're coming to the end. This is where my little red circle plays. I thought I would put the yellow dots where you can make the most money today in the world. And believe me, it's most all in finance, except Los Angeles there. They're the closest to Asia. Flights and boats and all that. They don't have to go to the Panama Canal. So if you start there, it's Los Angeles, of course, New York, and then you have Houston, Texas, and then you have the Cayman Islands. That little dot there in the middle, that's the Cayman Islands. It's not a small island, it's a big island. It's got more banks per square kilometer than anybody else. And they're not cheating. You know, they're not hiding things like Luxembourg and Switzerland. It's very open. There's a lot of funds there. So if you're in the private equity fund, you're in the hedge funds, you know, you're in derivatives, the Cayman Islands is a magnificent place to live. And it pays very well. If you go to Europe, of course, I have Monaco there. And then you go up there, Norway is a good place to be. I mean, you know, they have a lot of money, a lot of future, less taxes every year and more revenue. Then you go the Isle of Man, see? Then you have Luxembourg, you have Liechtenstein and Geneva in the European map. But look where the red balls are. These are mine, right? So I believe in my own theory. I have 6 directorships, Korea, Shanghai, Beijing, Hong Kong, and then New Delhi and Mumbai. So I've been there now for about 10 years, 11 years, and I can see the evolution. It is a very rewarding experience. And you have no idea how many of the people that we put there speak Mandarin after 10 years. I don't. You know, I thought it was horrible. You know, I can read the menu, you know, French fries and soup and chicken, I think that's about it. But that's enough to survive. But if you're going to make your decisions, you know, and if you're in finance, or you're in logistics, or you're in financial PA, you know, the financial, talking to the analysts, presenting your balance sheets and your annual reports is as important. And that is more in the business as in finance. So if you look at that, I thought I would do this as an amusing end. And coming back to this, my conclusion, you understand that the corporate interest is moving very fast, and it will not be reversed. We will not lose the internet. www2 is already there and active. So if you're not a pro, a super pro, in that part of the technology, it's going to be tough. The pyramid is going to change. If you go to a modern office, if you go to the InBev brewery in New York, there are no rooms. Well, there's one conference room, and there's a room for confidential telephones. The chairman, the CEO, everybody sits on open floors, you know, for a number of reasons, but that's team playing. So you don't need a director. You know, you can go from manager to managing director and become an executive. 3 steps. And everything in between disappears. So it is on the horizontal, as I said from the Russians, you know, it's on the horizontal that you got to be very good, because the vertical is very limited. You know, and then there may be 1 or 2 vice presidents, and then there's the CEO. And you know what the average life is of the CEOs in the US now? 21 months. The average life on the job of the United States CEOs is 21 months. Because, of course, the last 2-3 years were difficult. Return on investment negative, EBITDA negative, revenue down, obsolescence high, and these are no good for the big boss because it happens on his watch. So the candidate is very, very simple. We talked about it, but wherever you go, it's going to be the same story, because Facebook, Twitter is every place. The software to handle people is everywhere. The control software for your auditors is the same everywhere. You know, so I'm happy to be here. Thank you.